Well, hey there, guys. I'm ALBW, and this is the Curiosity Shop, the ZeldaEngine.net video mailbag where I answer your Zelda questions. I'm sorry if, like, the contact page hasn't been working and you haven't been able to get your questions in. It's been broken for a little bit. It should be working now, or at least within the next day or two, so it's not working, like, right after you finish watching this mailbag. You know, assuming that's when you intend to send a question. You can probably check back in a day or two and it should be working again, so sorry about that, guys. But our first question comes from R2D93. Who asks, A Link Between Worlds will supposedly show what happened to certain characters after the events of A Link to the Past. Which characters would you like these to be? Well, be sure to tell me your guys's in the comments, you know, the character that you'd like to see their after the game story expanded on in A Link Between Worlds. But, you know, like, for me, there's so many characters in A Link to the Past that just aren't expanded on a ton. That, there's just a lot of room for expansion, honestly. It's kind of hard for me to pick the one where, like, this is the guy I need to hear more about. This is the one character that matters to me. And it's the fortune teller. You know, I'm kidding, but you get my point. So there's a lot of characters, like, I don't know, the guy who tries to report you to the guards and runs into the trees. I feel like a reference to him could be amusing. Or Kiki, the little monkey guy in the Dark World. Or, the weird little purple bat guy that, curses you with, beneficial effects after you free him with magic powder or whatever. Like, those are all be great characters. I think the big one for me, though, would just be a lot of those creatures who are either stuck in the Dark World or characters who are affected by the Dark World, like the Flute Boy. Because I feel like there's a lot of story you could expand on there, and you could just do some really interesting stuff about this. Since the game seems like it's going to focus on the Dark World, there's a lot of story you could tell about what's happened to them since then. Did they ever get free? What happened in the Dark World during that time? Things like that. That'd be the big ones for me. But there's a lot of characters they could do stuff with, and I'm sure they'll do it with quite a few of them. Have, like, talk about this old grandfather or grandmother or something like that. You know, there's a lot of characters they could do it with. I mean, even like Aghanim, if they decide he's actually his own man and not just Ganon in a different body or personality or whatever they were going with there. Or King Zora with his monstrous Zora tribe. It'd all be cool to see again, but it's the Dark World guys for me. Noli asks, what kind of references from A Link to the Past do you think that they will include in A Link Between Worlds? Well, you know, there's always the recurring characters. I also think that we're going to see mostly the same inventory with a few changes and exceptions and probably some advancements. Like, we might see things like, I don't know, this is a bad example because it's not what I'm referring to at all, but like, you know, the hook shot turned into the claw shot, even though within a 2D game like that, or 2D style gameplay, would probably function the same. Or maybe like the Gale Boomerang, you know, things like that. I'd expect to see some evolved versions of the items we saw before. Like, if they do the lantern, it will probably be more like it was in the Minish Cap, where you can burn things with it. So I expect to see a lot of the same items. I expect to see, you know, the characters reappearing. Of course, we have the same world, so there's going to be a lot of familiar locations and familiar dungeons. But I also really think that they're going to expand on this Dark World stuff, and they're going to have a lot of information on what happened to the Dark World inhabitants, because it does feel like that's, based on things I've said, it's going to be a very focal part of the game. Juicy J asks, what do you think of the new Dark World footage seen in the latest Nintendo Direct? Well, it just looks about like what you'd expect it to look like. It looks like the Dark World, you know? It's a lot like the clips we've seen so far. It looks pretty close to the kind of look we've had in the Link to the Past. So, they've said that they're going to make it the main overworld, like the Light World or whatever, is going to be pretty much the same layout in Link to the Past, with, of course, some new content in there. Whereas the Dark World is going to be all the new areas and stuff, and it's going to be very different from what was in Link to the Past or whatever. But it seems like it's still kind of close in some ways. I mean, there's some big differences, but there's a lot of similarities too. So it still seems like the overworlds are going to be pretty close, even the Dark World. What interests me the most, actually, is not what they've shown, but what they've stated, that there's a kingdom in the Dark World, and it's not just like, oh, well, it's probably not just, oh, Ganon's in charge again. It's gonna be like some, I'm imagining like the thieves and the criminals, just formed a society in there since maybe they were trapped or something. I don't really know, but I'm really interested in that. As I said already, I think it's a very interesting concept to expand on and see what happened to those characters. Alex Plant asks, what do you think is going on with all the weapon class items for sale in that shop in A Link Between Worlds? I don't know, it's a very interesting thing. Like, I have my own theory on it, actually. I think what's going to be like is, I mean, it's clear that you have all these weapons and major quest items, the kinds of things we only acquire in dungeons. I mean, they made a whole point of that. So I think there's like two main possibilities. One, it's simple, and it's actually just like, I don't know, a black, let's say Like Lakes can take all that equipment from you or something, and this is a black market where you can buy it back or something. But since they put such a big emphasis on it, I don't think it's something that mild and simple. I think most likely what we're going to do is it's a component of how non-linear the game will be. At least that's my theory. I think what's going to happen is you can essentially explore the world map in whatever order, because you can acquire the main quest items used to traverse the world in any order as well. And I imagine what will happen is you'll either be only given one at a time through some kind of restriction, perhaps a limited currency that mainly is only acquired after beating a dungeon or doing certain other major tasks, and you'll be basically deciding where you get to go next, because you'll be deciding what order to get the keys and whatnot, like the effective keys to unlock parts of the overworld in what order to do that in. And I think it sounds like it's going to be really interesting. I'm kind of pumped. Trevor Magnani asks, do you think that there are any connections between the upside-down/dark Triforce on Demise's sword and the upside-down/dark Triforce in A Link Between Worlds' logo? You know, I don't know about a connection there, because honestly, when I played Skyward Sword, a lot of people took note of the upside-down Triforce on Demise's sword and thought it was like an upside-down cross, you know, sign of evil. But honestly, I kind of just looked at it as they put the Triforce on his sword because they were trying to draw parallels to the Master Sword, and the Master Sword has a Triforce. And, you know, they were just trying to make it so that, just depicting it because it was relevant to Demise, because Demise was after the Triforce. So I didn't really read too much into it, and I still don't. However, I do definitely think a lot of the one in Link Between Worlds. I didn't at first. I thought it was just representing the Dark World in the logo. You know, Light Triforce represents the Light World, and the Shadowy one represents the Dark World. But since they've talked about that too and put emphasis on it, I'm very intrigued. If they're really doing this idea of a Dark Triforce, I'd love to see some kind of thing where, like, there's the negative attributes, right? You have courage versus fear, maybe wisdom versus stupidity. I don't know how that would work. There's other things that could be used to parallel that would probably fit better. And you could do, like, powered weakness. They could come up with cooler versions that would still function as opposites. I'd love to see that, like the virtues versus the sins kind of concept. I'm very interested to see what they'll do with that. And maybe it will connect to the Demise thing. Maybe I'm wrong about writing that off like I was with Link Between Worlds or various things about Skyward Sword, like Phi being the Master Sword. Even if I'm still right about that, there was no hard connection, they could still do a more, like, loose connection, like, there's demon stuff going on with the Dark World and this Dark Triforce, if that exists, in A Link Between Worlds. It's still connected to Demise, so I don't know, we'll have to see. Ventus asks, yo, what's up, Axel, my main fishman? Not sure I'm supposed to take that. I don't think of myself as a fishman. But anyway, recently, Bill Trinan showed a video where he detailed the extent of the item meter. What are your thoughts on the meter, and how do you think it'll impact your experience in with the Link Between Worlds? Well, depending on how they do it, it's either going to have no impact whatsoever or quite a lot. I actually like the idea because I think they could do some really interesting stuff where they take away, you know, inventory management. You're not worrying about your stock of items, but they replace it with a very interesting form of time management where you're really thinking, okay, I can use this item as much as I want, but I'm going to run out of my meter for the duration of this fight. And how much can I use this item and this item for this short period of time where I'm in this fight or whatever? Will I be a sitting duck and not be able to use my powerful items after I do this really powerful attack, or, you know, things like that? You'll be thinking about your actions within a battle, and you'll be very, you know, very strategic about it. You'll be free to use your items as much as you want, but there's still that limit, and you'll have to think about it. And in that way, it might function sort of like an RPG, like active time battle system a little bit. That's a stupid comparison, but it feels a little similar to me. But that's if they use this well, because they can really do a lot of strategic combat like that if they balance out the costs of the items and make it something you gotta think about. And also they could do a lot of puzzles where you have to use do a bunch of items or use an item and navigate something within a short period of time. But also they could just not really do it that much with it, and it really just functions as a mild limitation to using your items, and doesn't really do much except mean you can use your items anytime. I'm hoping the former, because it could make it a very challenging and strategic game on a very localized level, not a big overall blah 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 level. And I'm interested in seeing what it's like, at least for this one game. Hachi asks, what do you think about the changes they are making to the Wind Waker HD? Do you think it will improve the experience of exploring the Great Sea? You know, yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think that, like, I complain about the Wind Waker a lot. Not quite as much as Twilight Princess, although that's mainly because I think there are bigger things wrong with the Wind Waker than the Twilight Princess, where it's a lot of little things. I definitely have a lot of problems with exploring the Great Sea in the Wind Waker, and I think a lot of the changes they're making really do help fix that. I mean, faster sailing does fix some problems, not all, not even close to solving a lot of my main gripes with the Wind Waker, but it does definitely help, and I think there are a lot of things in the game that will improve the experience of exploring. I think just reducing the menu lag of changing the wind and whatnot and going faster, I mean, they definitely serve the function aspect of it quite well, I think. The big thing for me is not having to pull up the Triforce charts, because I thought that was a really unnecessary part of the Triforce piece quest. But really what excites me the most is this news. It still seems rumorish, and I'm not too certain of it, but it does seem like there is some evidence that there may be a second difficulty level. And that's honestly going to be the first real selling point for this game to me. That makes me actually want to get it, because I'd like to play a harder Wind Waker. That's one of my biggest gripes about the game. So yeah, hopefully some of this stuff will definitely improve it, and I think it will. This is a related question, actually. Sort of similar. Locke asks, how do you think the changes to the Wind Waker HD affect the game in terms of coherence of theme and meaning? Is ignoring the wind while traveling with the swift sail an affront to the game's importance of wind? Does eliminating the Triforce charts do the same thing to the flooded civilization theme? That's a very interesting question. I'll say this. I don't think that those are anything I would prioritize about the game, because I really am all about games are games. It's about the function, it's about the gameplay, it's about how it works. If there's any element that needs to be prioritized or at the expense of the others, it's going to be that. That said, games should function with them all to get all those all the different elements, thematic, gameplay, story, and all those things should work together. That's the best kind of game, where everything works with each other. Nothing's sacrificed for the sake of another thing, it just all goes together. So with that in mind, I would say this. As I already said, I think a lot of the changes do help the exploration, but I think that also the Wind Waker HD is really basically just the Wind Waker. They're tacking some stuff on, but it really is tacked on. So it's going to feel cookie-cutter-ish. It's going to feel like you have these elements that really obviously weren't part of the original game, and it'll be like there's two slightly different aspects to the experience. The original content the game as it was designed, and the stuff that was cut out and replaced with some redone stuff. That's the part that'll feel like it's a fully done remake, but then you'll have the stuff that still feels like the old game. So it's going to feel weird, and I think regarding the themes, as I said, I don't like the menu lag of switching the wind in the Wind Waker, but at the same time, just getting rid of it at all, even if it's with an optional item, everyone's going to want to use the optional item, because it's the Swift Sail. It does leave a bad taste in my mouth, and I think there's better ways they could have minimized the wind issue without getting rid of it entirely, and I do think it does sort of ruin the wind theme. I think that there's better ways they could have done it, not so much in this, revised version, but maybe if they completely remade the Wind Waker or just did it differently the original time, where they could have made the wind an even more focal part by making switching it much easier, but you still have to switch it, and they could have made whole wind puzzles around it throughout the game. As for pulling it up, again, I feel like pulling up the stuff from the bottom of the sea, the Triforce charts, I feel like this is an important change, because the Triforce quest I actually have no problem with until it expects you to sail around and pull these up from the ocean floor. I hated that. But at the same time, removing it does remove the connection to the bottom of the ocean, as you implied, and the flooded Hyrule. But it also it removes the purpose of having so many rupees. I mean, the whole reason you collect rupees throughout the game is to pay off Tingle at the end. So really, I feel like there is going to be missing parts here, and there's probably a better medium that they could have struck here. There's a lot of things they could have done differently to keep those feels intact, and I do agree that they didn't need to change them, and it probably is going to be awkward because of that. But I still think it's probably the best in terms of functioning. Alright guys, that's it for this time. Be sure to send your questions to the contact information in the description if it's working. If so, if it's not, just wait a little bit. And I'll see you guys later. Well, hey there guys, I'm ALBW.